Let's start by praying. Dear Lord, please guide and direct this meeting. Help it to be impactful. Help us to find solutions to all the challenges that we face in Central Oregon, Lord. Help everybody to be professional and classy and to put themselves on both sides of the story and the fence and just be understanding and help us to be productive and help us to leave here tonight with solutions to keep Central Oregon agriculture alive. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you to everyone who has came tonight. This is amazing. Thank you. Church wants everybody to know if you don't want to stand in the back, there are more chairs over there. I'm a firm believer in the power of numbers. This is incredible. Thank you all. Everybody's obviously got a lot of care and concern about Central Oregon, so that's awesome. My name is Joanna Simons. My husband and I have a cattle business and farm in Madras, Oregon. So why are we here tonight? That's the big question. No matter how many differences are out there, we all have one thing in common. We all have to eat, right? We all stick a fork in our mouths at least 3 times a day. Me, probably a lot more than that. At some point in your life, you may need a doctor, you might need an attorney, you might need a mechanic, but 3 times a day, you need a farmer. So there's no arguing it. We cannot make food without water. We cannot protect our nation's food supply without water. This is a very serious situation. So I'm going to get everybody up to speed, quick, fast, and in a hurry, because there's way more important people to listen to up here besides me on what transpired in this area to get where we are today. The 8 irrigation districts in Central Oregon and the city of Prineville signed an agreement several years ago called the Habitat Conservation Plan. The purpose of this plan is to share available irrigation water in Central Oregon between farmers and the threatened to be endangered Oregon spotted frog. Unfortunately, between the drought and the sharing of water to comply with the Habitat Conservation Plan, farmland in Central Oregon is being forced out of business. The 2 challenges together was just way too much for this industry to handle. What makes Central Oregon unique is that we actually have available water, even through this extreme drought. But the balance has been thrown off, and the balance is a very delicate thing to find. We get so focused on trying to save one thing or a species, the scale gets completely tipped the wrong direction, or the other direction, where everything on the other side of the scale ends up suffering. A few examples would be the rules implemented on our forests, for starters. We see the problems there with the wildfires, the struggles we face as a nation with our wild horses, the spotted frog issues in Central Oregon. Not only are farmers affected by this, our bee populations are affected by this, the monarch butterfly populations are affected by this. Wildlife is struggling because of lack of feed, where normally they rely on farm fields for added food. If dry land was in short supply, and now our farmland is dry. Also, this area is a large hay producer for people's pets and livestock. And now these animals are going to suffer because our hay production is gone. So you can see the ripple down effect. There's got to be a balance. What scares me the most about this is the thought of expensive food prices in the future, but more importantly, food shortages. I like to try to be a progressive thinker and try to solve problems before they happen. And I'm just asking the same of everyone else. Cliff Bennett said it best the other day, we've already dried up over 1 million acres in Central California because of the balance being thrown off over the Delta smelt. The West Coast is actually responsible for the upwards of 85% of our food production, of the nation's food production. It is our responsibility to be sustainable and not to fight amongst each other and not pin farmer against farmer or farmers against radical environmental groups. It's our responsibility to be sustainable and know what one priority should be over another. There has to be a perfect balance. So in 2016, my husband and I founded a nonprofit organization to educate children and adults on finding the perfect balance where agriculture, wildlife, struggling species, and recreation can all thrive. It's a very complex situation, but it can be done. So the purpose of this meeting is to teach and educate everyone under the same roof about the Wildlife and Endangered Species Act, the regulations and responsibility we are all held to, probably everybody in this building, in our habitat conservation plan that all 8 irrigation districts signed along with the city of Prineville, and to hear legal advice to make changes or amendments to our habitat conservation plan, and to get the communities of Central Oregon on board to implement, advocate, and find funding for water supply infrastructure. So in this particular area, I feel like there's been a lot of, in Central Oregon, there's been a lot of he said, she said, that's not the way the law was wrote. It's been blame games on different districts, different board members, so on and so forth. This has been going on for a really long time. We are here tonight to open communication, to keep everyone on the same page, to state factual information, and to find short and long-term solutions to keep agriculture alive in Central Oregon. I can't even explain to you what incredible opportunity we have this evening to take advantage of the amount of intelligence and expertise that this panel of people right here in front of me can give us tonight, that we brought in. This is all under one roof for all of us to bounce all of our questions off of and all of our concerns. We get to ask them. So it's pretty incredible. It's a true honor to be able to introduce each one of these folks. So first I'd like to introduce Gary Gates. He's right here in front of me. He's an Illinois farmer and a trial attorney at the law firm OFW. He also serves as outside general counsel for several national agricultural organizations, including Agricultural Retailers Association and National Sorghum Producers. Bayes organized President Trump's agricultural team of advisors. He's kind of a big deal. He was the chief of staff to the first U.S. Environmental Protection Agency administrator, and he also owns a family farm in Jacksonville, Illinois. Second on the list is Karen Fallon. She's just up to the left of Gary. She is just returning from a 2-year stint for the Trump administration, Department of Interior. For the Department of Interior, she was the Deputy Solicitor for Wildlife and Parks, and as the Deputy Solicitor, Karen was the lead attorney in revising the regulations implementing the Endangered Species Act, including the regulations recognizing the rights of local governments to protect the economic stability and customs and cultures of their constituents. So she's also kind of a big deal. Next to Karen is Aubrey Betancourt. She is a 4th generation. She's also a big deal. As she's a 4th generation California farmer, she recently served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Water and Science for the Department of Interior under the Trump administration. Working extensively to bring efficiency and coordination among the federal water community with Bureau of Reclamation, United States Geological Survey, and the other federal agencies and bureaus. Prior to working for the Department of the Interior, Betancourt served as the USDA Farm Service Agency California State Director, where her mission was clear: to keep farmers farming through the delivery of effective, efficient agricultural programs to California's farmers, ranchers, and agricultural partners. As the director of a statewide nonprofit, California Water Alliance, for nearly 10 years, Betancourt developed a network of diverse water leaders statewide, bridging the gap between rural and urban agriculture and environment, advocating for water supply reliability for all Californians. And California's a big deal. So building on years of experience and expertise in the space where agriculture, resource management, policy, politics, and people meet, Betancourt consults utilizing knowledge, insight, and relationships to develop holistic strategies on the basis of actionable ideas, resulting in clear, efficient opportunities and solutions to many challenges facing farmers, rural communities, and the environment today. Lastly is Dave Duquette. This is the guy that I made my first phone call to. He's the one that stemmed this whole movement. So he's a big deal. He's the reason all these people are here. He's the founder of Western Justice, which is a collaborative voice empowering the future of Western lifestyle, our livelihoods, and industry events. He's also committed to upholding livestock owners, trainers, exhibitors' rights and liberties while ensuring the welfare of animals. If you go to westernjustice.info, and get a membership to his organization, he will not disappoint you. So also, I want to stress that we've got Bobby Alexander in the back. He works for WSR Insurance. He's here to talk about opportunities to sign up for drought and crop insurance to help combat these financially tough times. He's got other risk management tools that people can use to manage risk and offer financial help to get people through this drought. It's not a money-making proposition, but it does offset your costs that you'll incur for crop loss and grazing losses and so on and so forth. And then also Marty Richards, I'm going to have him say a little blurb up here about some federal drought relief options that he is exploring through Northeast Irrigation District. So enough with me. Now I want to open up the floor, because this is what I feel is the most important part of the meeting. I want to give everyone a chance to get all their questions answered and to be able to seek legal advice on possible ideas and solutions to all of our challenges. I'll have the FFA, well, it was going to be that she was going to walk around, but I think what we've changed to now is that you'll have to come up and maybe form a line right up here, and I'll have her hold the mic while you guys ask your questions to our panel of speakers here. And I just ask that people please be mindful of everyone's time. I don't want to sound rude or crude, but we all have sob stories. Everybody's got drastic, dire things happening in their lives because of this. Let's just try to stick strictly to questions so we can solve problems. So I'm going to start with the first question to kind of kick this off, maybe 2 or 3 more questions. Trish has got a couple questions, but yeah, I'll give it to you. I'll give it mine here. Okay, so my question is for Gary to start, because he touched base a little bit this morning on how the Endangered Species Act all started over breakfast. And I thought it was pretty interesting, and I want him to kind of talk a little bit about that.
Well, that was private information I gave you this morning. As you can tell from my gray hair, I've been around a day or two. I arrived in Washington, D.C. in 1969 with Richard Nixon. And my partner was Bill Ruckelshaus. And we knew of this Senator Harrison Williams, who was a Democrat from New Jersey. Senator Williams, many of you may remember, had gray hair like mine, went to jail because he took bribes from people. In fact, he spent about 2 or 3 years in jail. Senator Williams was the author and the sole author of the Endangered Species Act. Now think back. And Richard Nixon doesn't get out of this situation without playing, as I told him this morning. Richard Nixon had been talking about endangered species protection as early as 1971. In 73, all of you need to think back. What condition was Richard Nixon in December of 1973? He was in a terrible slot. He resigned his presidency on August 8th of 1974. He would have signed anything. Now, I was first chief of staff at EPA. We made sure, because my partner was Captain William Ruckelshaus, who was over in Washington State. We always made sure, since Ruckelshaus was the state legislator, that the states had primacy. And if you look at the Clean Water Act today, and Malcolm Wall from her state is the guy who put the amendment in. He said that the states have primacy. Water. That's not true in the Endangered Species Act. That's why we are here tonight. The Endangered Species Act of 1973 is the first government zoning program. And you just think about it in your own lives. Generally, zoning and what happens locally is an issue that involves local people, not bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. that Karen and Audrey had to deal with. Thank goodness I learned my lesson after 5 years. When I was 1969 to 1974, I got out of federal government, never to go back in. And there's a reason for that. And I think we need to thank these ladies again for their stepping forward to try to straighten this mess out that you are the subject of and never going to talk about tonight, because they are true experts in the endangered species area. But just think about it. The Democrats had complete control, and I am going to be partisan here because I am But in 1973, the Democrats controlled the House of Representatives and the United States Senate, and they had absolute control, and this is what they did. Now, we are here tonight, and these two ladies, and I don't know a lot about the Endangered Species Act, because I generally participate in the Clean Water and Clean Air Act and other environmental acts. They are in the Endangered Species Act. But just remember, this started in 1973 with an unfettered government. They could get anything through, and they did. Thank you.
Two more questions. This next question is for Dave. How did these extreme radical organizations get started, and can you give us kind of a background on some of these organizations that have tipped the scale and not provided a balance in the world we live in today?
Well, the interesting part that most people don't realize is that CBD, Center for Biological Diversity, whether it's, I can name out 10 of them: World Wildlife Fund, the Wild Earth Guardians, Earth First. Earth First was a domestic terrorist organization. The founder of Earth First became the co-founder of Center for Biological Diversity.
Can we get you to stand up while you're speaking?
Sure.
Thank you.
You bet. So, so Earth First, the founder of Earth First went to jail as basically a terrorist, and then he was the co-founder of Center for Biological Diversity. And I'm going to read a couple quotes to you that I wrote down. It doesn't take 10 minutes of Google searching. You can go on activist facts, you can go on there's all kinds of, when I was at Protect the Harvest, I ran Protect the Harvest for close to 7 years, and that we were called a K Street think tank, a PR juggernaut by these environmental groups in the Washington Post, because we were so good at exposing what they were doing. But one of the, here's a couple of quotes from these guys that I wanted to read to you. So, mind you, this is a couple of hippies that started CBD. And you guys, I mean, you don't understand. They want to get rid of all agriculture. They want the earth to go back to feral, everything feral. And whether it's our land or the animals or whatever. But one of the quotes is they wanted to technologize society. We will have to inflict severe economic pain to do that. That's one of their quotes, and they have it on their website. And if they can implement their way, everything they're trying to do, we can bring the industrial civilization to its knees. So these are the people that, and I understand why people negotiate with them. It's just like negotiating with the Humane Society of the United States or ASPCA, any of those PETA, any of those other groups, the animal rights groups. They're all one and the same. And that's something I want everybody to understand. All these groups are one and the same. There's players that work on one that work on the other. And they're all commingled. They have the same game plan. So when people go, I've heard about, I probably shouldn't say where it's at or anything, but I just heard from a good friend here that another area here in Oregon is negotiating with CBD. How many times, my question is, how many times are these people going to take advantage of us and go to the table? And with a group of guys going, hey, I'm going to outsmart these pot lickers this time. I'm going to outsmart, we're going to be the ones that outsmart. No, you're not. You can't go negotiate with these groups. You need to fight back, push against them, and make them go away. Hire people like Gary Davis. Hire people that have not only the knowledge, but the fortitude to go after them. Otherwise, this kind of stuff's going to happen everywhere. And I know it's already happened here. And right now, with this habitat conservation plan, I look at it like, you guys have let the genie out of the bottle. Now the best we can do, we can't put that genie back in the bottle. Now I think the best we can do, the best analogy for it is we got to rope it, tie him down, and hold it. But just know that these people, the senators, these not they call them NGOs, non-governmental organizations. These people are not our friends, no matter how smooth they talk, no matter how many lawyers or how much bullying they try to do. They're not our friends, and we need to go away from them. I mean, Karen was, if she wants to talk about that, if she gets into that, the Equal Access to Justice Fund, she was one of the foremost authorities, it probably is the foremost authority on the Equal Access to Justice Fund and what these people have done to sue the federal government so much that they're able, if they can't respond, there's so many malicious little lawsuits that they can't respond to them. If they don't respond to them in time, they get their money. And that's what they're doing. There was, what is it, 800 to 900 million going out the back door of Interior. I think I've heard the number, it's either 800 or 900 million a year going out the back door of the Department of Interior through Equal Access to Justice Funds. So, I'm going to let these guys talk about this issue. I just wanted everybody to know we have to learn to fight back against these people and push against them. And don't let them do this. They can't do it if we don't allow them to. So.
Thank you, Dave. So don't get us wrong. We understand there is obviously a need for every single species on this planet. God made every single one of us and every single species. I just wish my quest would be, well, one of my quests would be to have these radical environmentalists put their money where their mouth is. If they want to save these species, then put some of that 900 million or whatever it is they get towards water infrastructure practices or towards people like us to keep all of us in business where we can continue to promote the nation's food supply and give to it. And at the same time, we can keep these species thriving, but not have to worry about trying to find the money in order to implement the infrastructure to do so. So we are all about saving species, saving people, saving livelihoods. It just has to be better balance, and it has to be done in a correct fashion where everybody wins and not one side of the scale is suffering. So I'm going to ask Karen a question, and then if anybody wants to ask these guys things that you guys have been thinking about for a long time, as far as the habitat conservation plan, legal ways of doing things, I encourage you guys to start making a line, because you do have 4 of the smartest people, as far as I'm concerned, in the nation to answer your questions. So, and you didn't have to pay for it. I didn't do it for it. So my big question for Karen was amending the HCP, the Habitat Conservation Plan, or exiting the HCP. What we can do. There's been terms adaptive management brought up, and I just want her to talk about what it entails to amend it, exit it, change it, make it better, what it might cost, and the implications of doing that. And I just want legal advice in that area. So, go ahead. Please stand up and start making a line if you guys have questions.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Flying over from Denver, I look out, it is dry. I didn't see anything for a cow to eat, which is what I always look for growing up on a ranch in Wyoming. So I'm glad my cows are in Wyoming and not here. So let me talk to you first a little bit about the background of the ESA and a habitat conservation plan. Because I think maybe once I explain that, then when I talk about solutions with the HCP, it'll make more sense. So, right along, Congress passed the Endangered Species Act and the President signed it. There have been numerous runs to try to amend it and change it and repeal it. Congress has never done it. And I got to tell you, I don't think Congress is ever going to do it. So it is what it is. There have been several cases brought before the U.S. Supreme Court to try to argue that the Endangered Species Act is a violation of the U.S. Constitution. Every one of those cases has failed. The courts have held that the Congress has the power to pass the Endangered Species Act under the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. And so for people to say, well, we're just not going to follow it, or we don't believe it, or we don't want to do it, it isn't going to happen. Do I think the Supreme Court is wrong? The truth is I do. I don't think the Commerce Clause and the Founding Fathers ever envisioned anything like the Endangered Species Act, but I'm not on the Supreme Court, and I don't make the rules, and the U.S. Constitution says those 9 guys get to make the rules, and so following the Constitution, it is what it is. Now, the Endangered Species Act allows things listed as threatened or endangered. The Oregon spotted frog was listed as threatened. Now, one of the things we did in the Trump administration is that we set up a difference in liability under Section 9 take for threatened species versus endangered species. Your problem is that the frog was listed before the Trump rules came into effect. So prior to Trump, endangered species and threatened species are treated exactly the same. And what that means is that under Section 9, an individual, the irrigation district, the city, any individual or group cannot, quote, take an endangered species. And taking an endangered species means harming, harassing, shooting, hunting, killing, or attempting to do any of that, or, importantly for you guys, adversely modifying critical habitat. And adversely modifying means that changing the critical habitat so that it does not serve the purpose of breeding, feeding, or sheltering. Now, when the litigation came down is that Center for Biological Diversity first sued the Bureau of Reclamation because Bureau of Reclamation provided the financing to build Wickiup Dam and the other dams along the Deschutes. All right, so that's a federal agency. Federal agency is required to consult with the Fish and Wildlife Service if their action may affect an endangered species or may modify critical habitat. So CBD didn't argue that the dams were, in fact, taking. They were arguing that Fish and Wildlife Service failed to jump through the procedural loop under Section 7. And the truth is they did. Then a Water Watch of Oregon came along with CBD, and sued not only Bureau of Rec, but also all of the individual irrigation districts, including North Unit and all the other, I forget, I know it's 8 of them, but I couldn't tell you the names, sued them individually for take of the endangered species. And their argument is that by not keeping water in the main stem of the Deschutes for the frog, as well as for the bull trout and steelhead, I believe, are the other 2 species covered under the HCP, that they needed water to protect those habitats for the species. The settlement is that the irrigation districts were all going to continue to work on a habitat conservation plan under Section 10. And the habitat conservation plan is basically a document that says that we, the irrigation districts, commit to doing X, Y, Z, in your case, keeping water for the frogs, and in exchange for normal farming practices, you won't get charged with a take. And if you get charged and convicted for a take, it's $5,000 or $25,000 a day and 5 years in prison. That's the penalty under the Act. And so the districts were like, well, we can either hope that nobody charges with take and puts this liability on us, or we're going to negotiate an HCP. That was their choice. And so they made the choice to negotiate an HCP with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service so that these guys didn't have to go to jail. And I gotta tell you that I may not agree with every word in the HCP, but if I'm sitting in their shoes, I would have negotiated. And I appreciate what Dave said, but I also understand the penalties and risks under Habitat Conservation, or under ESA. So so think about it in your mind. That was their choice. Now, the HCP is basically a contract. And this contract has got, 700 and some pages, 751 pages. Yes, I have read it.
I know you have, but I'm just. How many of these people are presidents?
Yeah, it's,
Raise your hand if you read the HCP. I'm actually really curious. Raise them high.
yeah,
Back there in the
Oh my God.
yeah, it's not,
Every single person needs to go home and read the HCP.
Yeah.
If you're tired, you want to go to sleep, and you want to go to bed.
I got
There's
it.
volume 2 also. So that's
Yeah.
98 pages.
all right, so they negotiated the HCP. The HCP does have a provision in it to exit the HCP. But I'm going to tell you, the provisions are incredibly onerous. And so the provisions are basically that you have to give the other parties a year's notice. So say only one district wants to get out because they don't like it. They have to give the other parties notice. And there's lots of provisions. I'm trying to make this short because nobody wants to listen to me for 2 hours. But then you have to pay the cost if the other irrigation districts have to put in more water for the frog, then the district that gets out has to pay those costs with a year's notice. So it's not just a matter of, I don't think I feel like doing this anymore, I'm out of here. It is very onerous to get out. Now the one thing though that it does have is it does have adaptive management. And I think what I'd like to do is turn this over to Aubrey and have her talk to you about the adaptive management, which is a way to make changes to the HCP that are not near as onerous as just jumping out of the document altogether.
Back for 2 years. I sat at the Big Genius. My name is Aubrey Betancourt. Thank you so much for having me here. So picking up where Karen left off on what adaptive management is. So I'm gonna, HCP as a contract, I see it as rules of engagement. A contract stipulates what you can and cannot do. Question? And how you will relate to each other, right? All parties involved, how you will relate to each other. I see that as rules of engagement with all parties involved. It now says what you can and cannot do, how you can relate to each other under different circumstances. Getting in, getting out, those kinds of things. What is so critical about adaptive management and why that term is so important and why I think all parties involved, and I've advocated for a long time to have this become available as a tool in the toolkit of resource managers, is it allows us as resource managers, whether it's Fish and Wildlife or operators like Bureau of Reclamation or others, to manage the resource in real time, using real information, based on the real life circumstances at hand. Why is that important? Because that's not available everywhere in the United States. Where I farm, and where my family is, we don't have adaptive management on our water supply. My farm is 82% fallow this year. I haven't seen 100% of my allocation since I was in high school. My 5% was withdrawn this year because I don't have adaptive management. I'm operating under antiquated rules with antiquated information that tells the Bureau of Reclamation, who would love to do their job, which is to wield water and deliver it to people who need it. But it tells them based on a calendar, not on real-time circumstances, how to operate that infrastructure. A lot of the work that we've done, and we know the history of the West, we know the history of the Reclaim the West, We have brilliantly managed this system and built this amazing water supply that can deliver fresh water 365 days a year in parts of this world that you'd never see that before. It was designed for two purposes: municipal, industrial, and agricultural. Our environment has grown, our populations have grown, our ways of using that water has grown, and our priorities have changed. And we now say that part of that water has to be used to protect species too. In many ways, in some cases, this infrastructure hasn't been upgraded in a long time, and it was never designed to handle the people or the priorities of the 21st century. So investing in our infrastructure is key. The second part to that, though, is modernizing the rules that allow us to manage it in a way that gives us the flexibility to continue to achieve what I would consider sustainability, which is economic viability and environmental goals. Identifiable, achievable environmental goals. That gives us the flexibility to say, you know what we're doing right now works. We should double down and keep doing it. Or to say, oh my gosh, what we've been doing hasn't been working. The species are still continuing to decline, or the outcome and the environmental goal we're after is continuing to decline. We need to be able to have the flexibility to say, get it. We got to do something different. This isn't working. Let's find the right information. Let's find a solution that works. That's what adaptive management affords you. And that is a relatively new concept. You would think it's a logical concept, right? I mean, I don't like doing the same thing over and over again, thinking I'm getting different results. But adaptive management being integrated into our operations today is critical to allowing us to continue to move forward and achieve that economic viability and prosperity, as well as our environmental prosperity. I firmly believe arming our resource managers with the ability to say, you know what, this isn't working for the species, I need better information, I need better resources to do that, is going to see accountability in our environment. We will achieve our environmental goals, and we will also see business, and that's the way I look at it.
Oh my God, how many questions can we ask? Because we all have so many. It's not very loud.
Just stick your mouth right on it.
Is that any better? Yeah. So first off, before we answer a question, I don't know if everybody knows this or not, but Dave was instrumental in getting Dwight Stephen Hammond pardoned, getting a pardon written from the Trump administration. So, a couple of questions. We have two massive issues here in Central Oregon. We have issues in Klamath Falls, and we have our own issues here that are resulting from the Wicked Dam and our watershed here as well. First of all, here, when you talk about this adaptive plans, is it just a simple process through the contract? And then is this contract that we have, this management plan, is it court ordered? Is it something that the two groups mediated and the court signed as an agreement, or it's just physically a handshake saying, yes, we will do this?
So your first question on adaptive management, repeat that question?
Okay, so I didn't ask that question. So the first question is that, I guess I did, is that part of, is it just simply executing a chapter of the contract with the adaptive management option, or is it something, you didn't really go into depth on how do we institute that? How do we put that into play?
It's already in there.
Okay.
So it allows you, it's the rules of operations, it allows you to work with the resource managers to adaptively manage the resource based on the inputs of all parties involved.
Gotcha.
So it's a tool that is in there, it's built.
Gotcha. So that's not happening now. Obviously, we have nothing that adapts for our water years. In some years, we have a ton of water. In years like this year, we have very little water. But the same amount of water flows out of that reservoir from October to March. For a frog that's living 10 feet under the snow at this point. So all of our water is being dumped into the ocean in the middle of winter. How is that beneficial to a stinking frog at that point? So how do we make these changes? How do we get this contract?
So the HCP allows you to go and negotiate that and make that case. Okay, so that's what it gives you, the rules of engagement on that. And it says you can go have that conversation. You as the districts can go have that conversation. Work with these resource managers, make your case. That we can come up with something that works here for all of us considering the amount of resources.
That's something that everybody here, I think that's the
being efficient here.
Is how do we fix this? Is that what we're looking for? we see the problem. We see that there's no adjustment for the water that's coming out of the reservoir, depending on the water here. And so that's the question. Is it done with a lawyer? Is it done by just sitting in the room? What's the process, I guess, to institute this action?
So from as I read it, I'm going to let the attorneys do this because I just put it on TV. The HCP allows you to do this, allows all parties who sign, including the resource management agencies, Bureau of Reclamation, and Fish and Wildlife, to say, considering the real-time conditions, or I'll give you a real-life example, considering going into the fall where you're going to need to maximize resources, get out of a once in a, millennium per out scenario. It allows them to sit down and say, okay, how do we want to plan this? How do we want to look at how we're going to manage the systems if we need to recoup or we need to do whatever? So it gives you a safe place to do that without involving the court, without involving a judge, without involving the Ninth Circuit or anybody else.
So it's up to us to take that step.
It's up to the participants, yes.
Okay. So second question, then I'll step down. How do adjudicated water rights play into the Endangered Species Act? The perfect example is Klamath Falls right now. You have old water rights that are being ignored, and the water that these ranchers own and hold is being, again, shoved to the ocean.
All right, so I actually looked at, his question is how do old adjudicated water rights fit into the Endangered Species Act? And he pointed to Klamath, and I actually spent some time looking at that issue. Klamath, the court said, was not a taking of water rights, right, for the fish, even though Bureau of Reclamation turned off that water. You have to understand that the facts of Klamath were that was the very first irrigation project built under the 1902 Reclamation Act. At that time, there were no users in Klamath Basin. There weren't any water rights, there weren't any farms or ranches or anything. And so those water rights are actually owned and held by the Bureau of Reclamation. And so the court, there are a million other factors, but the biggest thing that the claims court looked at, which is the court you go to get money damages from the federal court, is that they said, well, these are Bureau of Reclamation water rights. Until these farmers pay off their contracts under the Warren Act, it's Bureau of Reclamation water, and if they want to send it all the way down to the frogs, it's not a taking because we're not taking Bureau of Reclamation water. The case on the opposite end of the spectrum happened in California. It was called Casitas, and that was an irrigation district in California. Casitas built they got Bureau of Reclamation, they built this big irrigation project. It was Bureau of Reclamation funds that built the project, but the water rights was owned by the irrigation district under California state law. Bureau of Reclamation went in and said, oh, we've got the Delta smell, we're going to make you, or it wasn't Delta smell, it was some other critter. So they made him build a fish, they went to Casitas and said, you guys have to build a fish ladder and divert your water to the fish ladder instead of sending it down to the Casitas users. The claims court determined that that was a taking because the water rights were owned by the district, not by the Bureau of Reclamation. So that's where the courts are looking at it, is who, it's under state law, who under state law actually holds the water rights. In your case, even though these are Bureau of Reclamation projects, the farms and the ranches existed prior to the projects, and the water rights are held by the irrigation districts. So it's NUID holds it for the benefit of the ranchers and farmers. So this is not the Klamath situation. Now, I'm not saying that I think you could, I'd have to do a lot more research to determine if you could bring a takings case, but I do not believe this is Klamath, and I think the court would look at the ownership of the water rights as different than in the Klamath situation.
So just to add to that, the existing contract between the Bureau of Reclamation and the irrigation district down there specifically specifies that the top 7 feet of that lake which was created to become a reservoir, that water is only to be held and belongs to the irrigators at that point. So the question is what is their next step? Where's their fight at? They've been through the courts. The courts have sided on them all the way along. They've sided for them for the last 4 trials at this point.
In Klamath or Luscious? I didn't know if they were.
This isn't Klamath.
Okay.
Irrigation. So they have obviously, don't expect you to know, you probably haven't dived into the contract itself. But that contract, so the question is, you don't have to dive into the contract, is what's the proper step for them to take next? They've been through the courts. They've won in the courts, yet they still have no water. Well, they're all they're the same one. But just like they told us, those climate irrigators told us, is that if you don't fight for us, the same thing's going to happen to you up there. And that's exactly what's taking place. So we're at least I'm here tonight to understand how to empower us to fight back. What are those steps to take forward going forward?
Okay, well, I'm not here to give you legal advice, so I'm fine. But I think that the boards need to look at the adaptive management. I think you need to put together your information and your data. I think you need to go to Bureau of Reclamation and Fish and Wildlife Service and say, here's how much water we have. Nobody ever envisioned a drought like this. This is obviously a changed circumstance. We need to change the way we're looking at it. I think that it's fair to at least talk about a taking, because the water right is a property right. Courts have recognized that. What has happened with Klamath since the initial rulings where the court was looking at it, I can't answer that. I was just trying to get in my mind why the courts would say one was a taking and one wasn't, and it really seems to turn on who owns what. And the rules under state law. So I think that that is a difference. Whether there's other intervening circumstances, I'm not an Oregon attorney. I don't even play one on TV. I do endangered species stuff. But I think it's something that you should think about. The other thing I'm going to say, because I got the microphone and they can't make me sit down, is I think if we turn this into a farmer versus farmer, one district versus another thing, I think that you will all lose. And I'm just going to put that out there.
Thank you. You can do wetlands mitigation by planting willows, right?
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? We can do wetlands mitigation by planting willows if you destroy some. Well, under the ESA, we have, well, not under the ESA, but we have fish farms and fish hatcheries. Why don't we have spotted frog hatcheries to mitigate any damage, lowering the water in the spring when they're mating and their eggs have to be washed along the river or whatever this is? Jay Barman in Sun River did an extensive study on these darn things. I happen to live south of Sun River and I'm a land surveyor, so I'm quite familiar with issues like this. So is it possible under the ESA, there again, to have spotted frog and other endangered species, hatcheries or aeries or whatever the heck it is, to protect the species? It seems logical to me, but the government, of course, logic sometimes flies out the window. Thank you.
One thing I want to point out there, and this is a little anecdotal on that whole question, is that Nevada did the tortoise, the desert tortoise, they did a sanctuary to do that exact thing. Well, Harry Reid had them all euthanized because they had too many desert tortoises out in the desert. So they euthanized a bunch of tortoises.
All right. So actually, sir, that question has been asked numerous times. I am not a biologist, but But the courts have looked at it and said that there is a biological distinction between hatcheryways and wild, natural, propagated, and please don't ask me to explain it to you because I could not at all, but that, we couldn't do that. And we've actually made that offer with numerous species.
Why not keep at it though? It's common sense, you know.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. The only way that that works is if the species is totally extinct. You can then raise it in captivity and do an experiment among the central population, but I guarantee you, you do not want to try that.
Audrey has said adaptive management, biological opinions. Now, many of you in this room have not heard of the invisible frog. The invisible frog is a case that went to the Supreme Court. The PhD who did the study on the frog in Louisiana, Mississippi, said you need to set aside your land, Mr. Farmer, and this guy was an attorney as well. So when you talk about the adaptive management, and I agree with that, make sure that you go in with the facts. Biological opinions, because every one of those that Karen mentioned, some young PhD has done a study on that frog, spotted frog here in Oregon, and the steelhead trout, and the, was it bullhead trout? Or bull trout. Bullheaded, yeah. So, think about that. You cannot fight these folks in the federal government because they have a biological opinion on their side with regard to what you were talking about.
And it's also scientific consensus too.
Well, I don't know about that, but all I know is just when you walk out of here, one term you want to remember is biological opinion. That some young PhD or some person trying to get to a PhD wrote the paper that gives rise to that. And we saw a show of hands of maybe 3 or 4 of you who had read the 751 pages. I looked at the people who were on the working group. Was there one agricultural person on the working group of this habitat conservation plan?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, a lot of them.
Well, and which group were they in? Because I don't see them, and I've had several people look at the organizations of the working group, and there's not one farmer that I see, or one farm organization on the working group, nor do I have any idea who were the technical people, and it shows the dates the technical people met. I assume there's some record of that. Were any of you there?
Yes.
Yes?
I beg your pardon. Yeah.
Okay. If you were there, then terrific. But when you read Habitat Conservation Plan, it doesn't list any farm group. Biological opinions, you don't want to forget.
So you've got probably 3%, 2 to 3% of the people of Redmond are right here tonight. And there's power in this room. And we're fed up. We're fed up with the state government. We're fed up with our federal government. And what I want you four to do for us tonight, in 5 minutes or less, is give us 1 or 2 takeaways that we can start doing tomorrow to stop the stupidity of this whole asinine situation. And you know what to do. We need to hear what to do. Practical things that we can do to stop the stupidity of these idiots who have money, unending money, to stop society. And that's what's happening today. So tell us, give us 1 or 2 takeaways that all of us in this room can form together, we the people who form the states, who form the federal government. We the people are the government of the United States of America. that we're up against absolute tyranny in the form of upside down oligarchy. And that's what's happening in the United States right now. And the lobbyists have taken over. You know this. So what can we do as just 500 people in this room to stop these people from doing it? I like what you said on the end. I like it. Peaceful non-compliance, but also numbers. If we show up in numbers, what do we need to do first? What do we need to do second?
I know some of you in this room know that I have advocated for the power of local governments for like ever. One of the things that we did in the Trump administration was to give some of this authority back to local governments. Let me start with the Endangered Species Act. Under the critical habitat, when you list a species, it's based on biological information only. No economic information can be used. When you designate critical habitat, though, critical habitat is only designated considering economics, national security, and other relevant impacts. Before we got into office, and we started rewriting the Endangered Species Act rules, the Fish and Wildlife Service had the expertise in the economics and other relevant impacts. And the other relevant impacts were never defined. When we rewrote the 4B2 rules for the Endangered Species Act, we said that economic impacts and the expertise for those lay in local governments. Whether it's county government or a conservation district, it has to be a locally elected board on the general ballot. So whatever your state allows for that. And so that when they designate critical habitat, which is what your problem is with the frog, they have to consider the economic impacts and give weight to those impacts, because Fish and Wildlife Service is only expert in biological information, not in economic information. The other thing we did is we defined other relevant impacts. And we said other relevant impacts has to include jobs. And who best to know about the jobs that could be lost because of the critical habitat designation than your county government? We said that economic or that other relevant impacts has to include community impacts. So if your community is planning to build a school or a hospital or fix a road or whatever it is your county is doing, that has weight in the designation of critical habitat. Other relevant impacts also includes adverse environmental impacts. Because what you're doing is you're, for example, stopping all logging, which is going to lead to catastrophic wildfire, that isn't going to be good for the frog or the owl or whatever the heck it is they're designating critical habitat for. And who best to know those local impacts than local governments? And the reason that that's important is that by giving weight to counties or states, because I know you guys live in Oregon and your state probably won't agree with your county. So we separated them out for states like Oregon and Colorado and some of these places, and poor California. Because the Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't have to designate critical habitat unless the species is going to go extinct. And that extinction bar is incredibly high. So the first thing I would do is I would get with your local governments and say, look guys, you got to understand that you have power here. But the Fish and Wildlife Service and the other federal agencies aren't going to wait for you. You got to have your information and data ready. You got to know the economic impact of farmers in these areas. You got to understand the economic impact of the logging community or the mining community or whatever you guys are relying on to be able to survive here. One of the other things that I would look at local governments to do is, I was on the writing team to rewrite the rules for the National Environmental Policy Act. National Environmental Policy Act applies to every major federal action significantly affecting the quality of the human environment, which basically means every time the federal government spends $1, they have to comply with NEPA. And we added areas for local governments to be directly involved in government-to-government discussions. Now, I'm going to caution you all, that does not mean that you can just throw the federal government out of your town. You can't put all federal employees in jail. I'm not saying to go that far. Well, maybe. I'm kidding. You guys gotta laugh or smile or something here. But what I am saying is that if you guys want to take back this country, you got to start your county commission. People in this room got to push on those guys and say, look, it used to be as a county commissioner, you could just worry about roads and schools, and you didn't, it was easy to be a county commissioner. I wouldn't be a county commissioner now for all the tea in China. But they have the ability to push back on the federal government and force them to consider what's happening in Redmond. It was amazing to me. So I go back to Interior, and I grew up on a cow-calf operation, 5th generation in Wyoming. And Interior, they do these deals, they introduce you to a bunch of people, and they say, you have to give your title and what you're working on, and then they say, so say one interesting thing about you. And so for 2 years, my interesting thing was, I grew up on a cow-calf operation, 5th generation in Wyoming, and we still own the ranch. In 2 years, I met one person that knew what a cow-calf operation was. One. So if your local governments aren't willing to educate these guys who actually have good hearts, I'm not saying all the federal government's terrible, but these people don't know who you are. So that's an answer to your question. There may be others, but that's the best one I know.
What she said. Take a step further. You've been given, fight smart. Fight smart. Feels good to bloody someone's nose. It doesn't get you your water back. Fight smart. Fight smart. You've been given these rules of operation, okay? Rules of engagement. Don't let someone else violate them. Don't let someone else come in here and tell you how to do this. Stay engaged. Support the operations. You know your HCP better than anybody else, and utilize it. Invest in yourselves. Be your own advocate. Right now, look, I was at FSA. We all know what that used to be called, right? Farmer welfare. I called it something completely different. My job was to keep farmers farming. All costs. I looked at that program, I looked at a lot of other programs. When I got to Interior, I did a lot on financing of infrastructure. I play by pirates' rules. I take what I can and I give nothing back, because $1 in your hands is better spent than $1 in bureaucrats' hands. So, fight smart. Work with, be an advocate not only in your counties, but be an advocate in other strategic positions. Be a place of information. They don't know us. Karen's absolutely right. They don't know who we are. I used to say when I went to Interior, we'd get into meetings, and when I went to Reclamation, and I would say, I would sit in a meeting, and we would have conversations, and decisions were going to get made, and I would sit there, and I would say, look, I'm going to fight you. I'm going to fight you. It's going to be fair. It's not personal. But I'm telling you, when I close my eyes, I can tell you the name, the age of the children, the truck, and the name of the dog of the person that decision is going to affect. I have the privilege of saying the opposite now, too. When we talk about we're going to go in there and get them, I can close my eyes and see exactly the good person who's just trying to do their job, and they're bound by laws that may not let them do that, or they need more information to make them better in their decision making. be engaged, let them know who you are, be smart. You've got a set of rules here that says how you can engage with each other. One other thing that I've seen work elsewhere, another action item, make sure you're having your own independent scientific review. Okay, we've been very successful. Use good information. You want good information to make good decisions. Make sure you're holding each other accountable. They want to hold me accountable in how I use my water. I want to make sure I'm holding the agency accountable in what they're doing is working for the species. I would be looking at, making sure you have your own independent science that corroborates and you can work along the line. So what happens, if you get down the line and it's not working, you can't ask for more of the same. We're going to look at comparatives and say, what can we do differently? And we're going to look at that fairly, we're going to look at that legally, we're going to look at that scientifically. So that's another avenue of something very smart that you can do. But there are a lot of great, from what I can tell, a lot of great people who want to get engaged, who are very intelligent on the subject. This is the place that you all need to live, be engaged, be strategically put in different positions, network and work together, identify achievable goals, and work together to do that. And the rules of engagement allow you a lot of opportunity to leverage and advocate for yourselves. It's not always a hammer. And if you want to change it, you've got to be at the table, because it's not enough to be at the table and off the menu. You better know what you're ordering when the waitress comes back around. So get clear on what you're looking for. And you've got a lot of people, I know you hear it, you've got a lot of opportunity here to develop water supply that I've seen. That sounds incredible. I would love to be able to use water that goes to a species person and be able to use it again for myself. That would be incredible. I'd be all about that. I would be oh my gosh, guys, you know how much I do for that. So I think you have a lot of opportunity to develop infrastructure here too and develop supply, and that's a great opportunity that not a lot of folks have. If you're looking for those avenues, get aggressive, get smart about how to finance those projects. Work with folks on what are the right ways you can channel your energy into advocating for that. Making the economic argument, making the environmental argument, making the sociological argument. Make sure you have your data and your numbers. You have multiple organizations working together, pulling and rowing in the same direction, and saying, we want to identify this, and we're going to get it done by that. We did a lot, too, on the rules in terms of NEPA to get it done in a timely fashion. That's the tricky part. Here's why rowing in the same direction gets you what you want faster. Because the moment there's dissonance between groups involved in some of this, it's a really easy thing for an agency to go, you guys don't agree, we're out. And they'll just go, we're not going to touch that until you all agree about it. So that thing that could be done in 18 months may take 10 years. Don't put yourselves in that position, folks. Make sure you're working together so you can pull together to hold your counterparts accountable. If you've got a project that needs to do a NEPA review, we said you have to get it done in 2 years. That rule still stays. They have to finish a NEPA review in 2 years. Don't give them the satisfaction of being able to say they can't finish it for you. Get in there and say, oh, we want the thing, we want the NEPA review so we can get our infrastructure, so we can get our water, so we can make sure we're helping people and species work to make this happen. Get in there, stay knowledgeable, stay advocating, identify achievable goals, work together, sort it out, keep it in the family, and pull together and find dollars wherever you can. And there's a lot of ways to do that, and it works really well when you all have strategic positions in your community to do that. So.
Hi, I hope you can all hear me back there. No? But really close? Okay, really close. I feel like a Roger Olsen. I was at Congressman Bence's town hall meeting Saturday, and I asked the question about this very topic to him. It sounds like he is working on some things in Washington that will put ranchers and our livestock and food up on top of a pyramid of issues that we're all trying to understand and get through here, which is good, because that means he's aware. He came up, cut his teeth apparently on water management issues in Eastern Oregon, so he's aware of what we're going through here now. One of the things I did to start my question, first of all, we were given like 10 raffle tickets, and you had to have your raffle number drawn in order to be able to ask a question. I was the last ticket drawn, so I got to ask my question. But what I did was I started out with a little bit of the history of Wikia and Green Prairie, and I know that 100 years ago, we went through a very similar drought situation. It lasted 12 years or better, and a lot of ranchers actually gave up here in Central Oregon and went back to the valley or down to the Central California Valley. And that kind of began the whole discussion of creating Wiki Up and Crane Prairie. And a lot of people didn't know that. But if the spotted frog is truly native, it found a way to survive before the dam was ever built. For decades, it knew how to survive. We don't know what the droughts were 100 years prior to 1920. But there were droughts prior to 1920, and those frogs know what to do. There are species of frogs in Africa and Australia that in the drought, they dig deep, they burrow down 3-4 feet into the ground, and then as soon as the wet season comes, they come right back up. And I don't think that our frogs are any different. But here's the problem I have with adaptive management. How do we know that the people who are bringing us the numbers on frog populations are telling us the damn truth? How do we know? We're relying, we might as well just, apply adaptive management to the next election. Because that seems to be what's going to happen. Is adaptive management is going to determine our political course for the next 100 years. So we have to have some means of cross-checking their data. We need people, just like poll watchers, we need people watching the frog counters.
Here, here. I don't disagree with you. I've seen this in other on the state level in California. The State Water Resource Control Board tried to do unimpaired flow on a series of tributary rivers. It didn't happen. Wonder why? Those tributaries hired an independent scientific biological company to monitor their rivers for 12 years and had independently peer-reviewed publications and articles that said, no, the science and the operations that the state was proposing would actually kill the fish, not save it. And they were able to challenge it and push it back. So we have to take the science on ourselves too.
Okay, so that was one part of my question, a little caveat there. The thing that I really want to know is if one of you could explain a little bit more in depth the creation, the origins of equal access to justice and how it's being deployed today and why and how do we stop it?
Equal Access to Justice Act. Before we went to Interior, that was like my favorite burning subject. So the Equal Access to Justice Act was actually passed in the Reagan administration. Reagan signed it. And the reason it was passed is because you have a little coin dealer in Wyoming. He had to challenge the federal government. And what they were trying to make this guy do was just completely egregious, and it was personal, and there was no legal basis for it at all. So Congress got so kicked at it, they passed the Equal Access to Justice Act. And basically what the Equal Access to Justice Act says is that if you have to sue the federal government, and the federal government has got no basis in law or fact for their position against you, and they lose, they have to pay your attorney's fees. And they have to pay it unless you have less than 500 employees, because they figured the big guys could afford all the attorneys they wanted. And you had to be worth less than $8 million. And then Congress capped the attorney's fees at that time $125 an hour, which if you add inflation to it now is about $200 an hour. And that's the way it worked until the Clinton administration. And during the Clinton administration, what happened is he got rid of what they passed the Paperwork Reduction Act. And the Paperwork Reduction Act was supposed to make it easier for people to, you have to fill out less paper. But one of the pieces of paper that he got reduced was the accounting for the attorney's fees paid under the Equal Access to Justice Act. The other problem that you had is you had courts looking at it, and they would say that I talked about the $8 million cap, net worth cap. They only applied that to individuals. If you're a, quote, non-profit public interest, you automatically comply even no matter what your net worth is. And so right now, on a wholly separate issue, I'm in a big fight with Natural Resources Defense Council because they're trying to take over my law school, and it really ticks me off. I looked it up, they're worth $500 million in 2019, and they can get equal access to Justice Act funds. The other thing that the courts did is that they said, well, environmental law is a specialty. Now, I don't get to be counted as a specialty because I do environmental law on your side, but these groups that do it on the other side, like Earth Justice, because the earth needs a good lawyer, they can do add-ons. I've seen attorneys' fees, hourly fees for them up between $600 and $800 an hour. And if any of you want to pay $600 to $800 an hour, I got cards. Now, we have worked for years to try to fix that. The act was written with perfectly decent intentions. If you sue the federal government and they're just out to get you, because I made lots of great friends in the federal government, but there are bad apples like there are bad apples everywhere, and so you can end up with a suit like that. And they should reimburse you for the attorney's fees. But this whole idea of it doesn't apply to the cap doesn't apply to nonprofits where it would apply to you guys, even though none of you got that kind of cash, if your farm is worth that much, you can't get attorney's fees. So we have worked so hard to try to get that fixed, but we have never gotten Congress to pass a bill to fix those rules. Now, one of the things that we did at the Department of Interior when I was there is that we at least required an accounting. So at that time, you could go on Department of Interior website under solicitor and see every dollar we paid in attorney's fees. Because I think the public ought to know what your money is going for. And the Endangered Species Act really drives me nuts, because the Endangered Species Act is all based on time frames. So it's not, when an environmental group sues under the Endangered Species Act, they're not suing to say, our science says list the frog. They're suing to say, the Endangered Species Act requires you make a decision in a year. Fish and Wildlife Service, you can't make a decision in a year. We win and pay our attorney's fees. So it's not the science they're suing over, it's the fact that fish can't comply with the deadlines. And the truth is, fish can't comply with the deadlines because they get so many listing petitions, there's no way. So how do you fix it? I think you should talk to your congressman and get Cliff Vance to get in there and get him to fix the problems in the act. Don't get rid of it, because it does have an important purpose. But there are easily things that we should be able to fix in there. I would be happy to help draft the bill. To be able to deal with that and make that happen. Because like Dave said, I am fully convinced that there are environmental groups that fund their group on Endangered Species Act funds, and they shouldn't be using our money against us to try to put us out of business.
I didn't know if we're supposed to be anonymous up here, but my name is Rob Rastovich. I'm a third-generation rancher, Central Oregon, 102-year-old farm. Also a member of the Farm Irrigation Board. Now, I hate frogs as much as anybody. I've been fighting it for the last 10 years. My father was on the irrigation board. My grandfather was on the irrigation board they built, or wherever we built the canals. But that's not our only problem now. And I'm willing to bet, and I'm not going to ask anybody to raise their hand, but I'm willing to bet that a large portion of our audience tonight starts with water rights that are very junior. The 1913 water right, which is Northwood, they're at the bottom of the list. When the water comes down the river, they're the last ones to get the water. Right junior to them is Lone Pine, and up to that is Arnold Irrigation District. I'd also be willing to bet there's not too many Swally people here, or too many COI people. although definitely some, because their ditches are pretty full. Swally has a full ditch. I drive by COI's canal every day, and it's full, and it's going out. They've got plenty of water out there. Our water is stuck in Crane Prairie. Crane Prairie is full. So we have to fight not only the frog, which I have been doing that for the last few years, and it is a little bit like, hitting yourself with a hammer. But we also have to fight water law. Right now, as Arnold Irrigation, Tumble Irrigation, we are all facing lawsuits from patrons who, when we want to pipe our ditches and pipe our canals to get more efficiency so that we don't have to use water, so that we can maintain that balance, we get sued by the patrons. Tumble Irrigation District has lawsuits going on right now. Arnold Irrigation District has lawsuits going on. COI has lawsuits going on that we're harming their natural beauty of the canal. So we've got the frog, we've got our own patrons, we got junior water rights, which are farmers fighting farmers, right? So one farmer gets it to the other. And we've got water law that dictates you have to use it or lose it. So in other words, I have to take my water, whether I want it or not. I have to take it and put it out there. Even if I have a quarter acre or a half acre or 1 acre of water, I got to use it or lose it. To me, what I've seen is water law is using laws that were maybe relevant in 1890s, but they're not relevant today. There's water grids, free market of water exchanges. We can't exchange water through districts. If I have 20 acres of water that I'm not using, I can't give it to my cousin in North Unit who needs that 20 acres. It has to stay within my district. So my question becomes, how do we change these antiquated water laws? Not just, we got to fight the frog, but we've got lots of water problems, not just the frog. How do we get these other laws to move forward and modernize?
Again, not an attorney. I agree with you that I was stunned to hear about the inability to do transfers. Of course, I come from a really weird place in California. But it does limit your flexibility, and that is a concern. I think you're asking all of the right questions. That's all the more reason you have to stay in it. Lock your arms and start figuring out what are your options, because you're not going to change it one off. I think just strategically, you got to eat the elephant one bite at a time, look for these opportunities, come up with creative solutions, look and see if someone else has something that could work. I mean, I'm not telling you anything other than you've got to stay in it and asking the right questions, and I would get creative. Most importantly, you want to solve and answer these questions yourselves before someone tells you how to do it. So whatever mechanism you have, or whatever means or structure or safe place that you can create for yourselves to solve this problem together, protect that with your life and stay in it and solve it for yourself, and let the law react to you and let government react to you. That's the biggest bit of advice I can give you.
Transfer laws, and you're right, the water laws were 1890 and 1818, and Oregon State's, I think, 1903. And you have got to change that in your state legislatures. Even though the Endangered Species Act gives the federal government the power over your water, and it's the only statute that does. The Clean Water Act does not, because we made sure it did not. The Endangered Species Act does. So you, with your local state legislature, as Karen and I'll say, your county commissioners have enormous power at the legislature, even in Oregon. And so you're going to have to do it at the local level to get those ancient laws changed, because water was a problem back at the turn of the century, and they gotta change, or they got a set of rules. So you're gonna have to do the same thing.
Say a little bit on that. There's, in the last 15 years of me becoming less of a horse trader, more of a political activist for agriculture, I've witnessed and seen a lot of times where people have come together, and the best way to activate change and do that. I don't know the laws here. I don't know what everything's set up, so I can't tell you guys specifically how to do it. But to get together and, like Aubrey said, lock arms. We stopped some things in Missouri that we ended up just rallying people, just like this deal right here, rallying people together. And we stopped some pretty malicious stuff that was going to make a 2-acre pasture in Missouri of all places, a 2-acre pasture with 4 headed cows on it, made it be a cake home. And we stopped it right there. 600 people showed up at the town hall meeting for these commissions. And that's the kind of thing that makes a change. You gotta show up, you gotta be engaged. And that's the toughest part. But you got somebody, you got your own little Erin Brockovich for North Unit over here. She's here. Trying to talk about all this and what we've done and what we're doing, and the reality is she's been kicking some butt with this deal. So, and Jeremy's been helping. I mean, he's probably but she's the one that's been pushing this. And you got somebody that's trying to organize this stuff, and not that she has the time to do it, just like all of us. None of us, in agriculture, we don't have the time to do this stuff. But you're gonna have to make time. If you want to change, you got to make time.
Gary, I had a good question. Is there, our state legislators here, is there any here tonight? County commissioners?
You see, they ought to be here. Your state representative, your state senator, you probably don't even, I don't know who my state senator is, because I don't have any problems out of Richmond with it, but you do. But your representative, your state senator, and your county commissioners should be here tonight. They are your friends. They are your neighbors. Get them out. And get on your job.
Everybody hear me? So tonight, somebody asked, what do we do? And these educated people told us we need to take back the county commissioners. We need to take back the state legislature. How do we do that? You have to get involved in a political party. You have to get up off of the sidelines and get engaged. Voting is not enough. To be involved in the party, you need to be a precinct committee person. How these people get on the ballots to vote for, the precinct committee person affects that. You need to get involved. The county commissioner positions in Deschutes, 2 of them are up, and they are the Republicans. If we do not do something in the May 2022 primaries and get a good, conservative, constitutionalist, preferably a Christian in that spot, we are going to be overrun by what you see is in the streets. And you know it's coming. In communism, there are no private farms. So when you see what's happening to you farmers and you ranchers, and you see what's happening with the government overreach in Oregon from the governor's office all the way to the national and the federal level, it's coming. And you can see what's happening. Bill Gates buying farms. Why? Why? Because they do not want you to have farms. And so if you want to get involved and take back the state legislature, all 100% of the state representatives are up for election in May 2022. This year you need to get involved, and the Republican Party in Deschutes is looking for you. If you go to the Deschutes Republican Party webpage, there will be a thing that says how to sign up to be a PCP, and that paperwork is easy to fill out. less than any rental form or anything. So for us to fight back, you literally need to fill out one piece of paper and start showing up once a month to a meeting. And there's like 300 or 400 spots open, vacant in Deschutes. And so this is what we need to do. They're talking about rally the troops. You know, we're all here from different groups. I'm here from a particular group. We need to organize as many, but attack as one. And that's literally a communist tactic. And they're using it on us. They've got the Antifa, the BLM, the Central Oregon Peacekeepers, all the same thing. And they are pretending to be unaffiliated, and they just happen to be in agreement and have the same principles. So, to do what we need to do, we have to organize. And so, I'm telling you now, just voting is not enough. You need to become a precinct committee person and, you know, go to the Deschutes Republican Party webpage. You Google it, DuckDuckGo it, whichever internet search engine. But that's all I have to say. That is our solution.
And along with what they said, this was back in the early 90s. I had an issue. I was living over in Roseburg at the time. And I wrote my congressman. And he was kind enough to write back, but he wrote something else to me that was interesting. He said, so few, this was before the internet, gang, where we give you a stamp, and you lick the envelope, no spell check, you know. But he said for every letter he got, it represented 3,500 opinions per letter. He got 12 letters on a certain issue that changed his vote. I personally belong to the National Right to Congressman. It's a website which gives you information, bills passing, whatever. You can go on there. Don't call them up because phone messages get deleted. I don't know how, but they do. But I write, the president goes right on down, all your congressmen, all your senators, and I become friends now with some of my state representatives through this. But taking action, and if you write a letter or an email, that's a hard copy that they have. Some of us maybe not be able to be a precinct chief, but you can email now so easily and have your voice heard. Because that was many years ago when I heard that one letter represents, he figured 3,500 opinions, and this was Peter DeFazio. Not a guy that changes his mind too easily. So there's many ways to get involved if you heard it, and I want to thank the people here that came and organized. Thank you very much.
Hello? Yeah. Can you hear me? So, I'm not really sure on, maybe because you guys know more about it, but I was just reading on what is an Endangered Species Act, and it's 1973 is a key legislation for both domestic and international conservation. The act aims to provide a framework to conserve and protect endangered and threatened species and habitat. And I was here just to think, maybe, like you said, fight smart, and I had to look up species. So I look up species, and it's a class of individuals having common attributes designated by a common name. It's a logical division of a genus or more comprehensive class. And if we could just play the words, and I'm kind of inviting something to just be, for everybody to be thinking about it, but I think there's a new endangered species here in Central Oregon. It's called ranchers and farmers. Words, they want to play word games? Okay, here's a word game. There's the word game. Can we win on the word game? We can, just by using some forces. So, that's all.
Good evening, I'm Kathy Adair, Deschutes County Commissioner, and actually fourth generation ranching family from come to Oregon and we had cows and calves, so I know what those are. I just wanted to say thank you to Trish for asking me to set this up here. I think we really need to save the water for our community, for our farmers, for our ranchers, for agriculture. I mean, when you go in the market, last year you couldn't find barley. I mean, oh my gosh, they sell garlic by the semis from Jefferson County. I heard it had a fungus. I hope it wasn't a water issue, but please, everyone, listen to what they said tonight. I know we can make a difference. I don't want to happen what happened in Common Falls. So please, join arms and let's really get our water issue solved. Thank you so much for all the people that flew across the country to be here. I appreciate it immensely.
Okay, well, like the commissioner said, thank you guys for coming here. There's power in numbers for sure, and we do have to band together. So there's some flyers going around that has to do with this meeting tonight that we've handed out up till this meeting to get people here. But the reason I wanted those flyers handed out is because it talks about our nonprofit on that flyer. Our nonprofit, the reason we started it is because we're very passionate about wanting to continue to educate people, and we want to play a key role in getting Central Oregon farmers back in business. So we do live hand to mouth. Jeremy and I and Trish and her husband put up our own funds along with the funds we have in our Perfect Balance 501c3 account to make this happen tonight. But we are asking that if you share the same passion and you're willing to contribute to our efforts, we will spend your contribution wisely and we will find the perfect balance. There has been people in this audience that have helped us contribute or have contributed to our nonprofit to help this take place tonight, and for that we are very grateful. I don't want to mention all of them because I just don't feel like I tried to disclose everybody, but without their okay. But it's going to take money to get this done. Unfortunately, it takes money to get everything done. I wish my pockets were deep enough, but if you can't find a flyer or you want me to get you one, just let me know. And your donations are totally tax deductible because our nonprofit is a 501c3. So I also want to thank Trish and her husband for coming on board with Jerry and I and making this happen and helping and teaming up with us to make this happen. And I want to definitely thank all 4 people up here for, like the commissioner said, flying across the country, riding across the country, and being able to take this on. Every single person right here is willing to take this on with us. So if you guys are interested, please come talk to me. So if you guys have any more questions, feel free to pull one of us aside afterwards, and we'll do what we can to answer it and do the best we can to get this headed in the right direction. So thank you very much for coming.
I just want to say one more thing real quick. The team, I want everybody to understand what Trish just said. This group is going, there's a lot of strategy that's going to have to go into what is going to happen here. Anything that can fix what's going on or help it out. So there's a lot of brain trust sitting right here. I'm out of that group. But there's a lot of brain trust sitting right here that can figure out a plan to go forward. So that's what she's asking for, your support, is to help push all that forward.
He explained it better than I did, definitely. And I'm not going to stop, so there's that. So I'll go with it. Also, Marty Richards, he's got some information he wants to share about drought relief and some stuff that they're working on to try to get drought relief going.
As most of you probably know, the federal government gave the state of Oregon $150 million for disaster. And drought being a disaster, we're trying to access some of those funds. One of the first things that we're doing in Jefferson County is the Chamber of Commerce has an online petition that you can go to and just put your name on it, and you'll be part of the petition. That will go to the governor and to the emergency board. The other thing that we're doing in conjunction with Jefferson County Farm Bureau is there's a voter voice where if you go to the Oregon State Farm Bureau website, you'll find what's called a voter voice, and you can use their talking points, and you can draft a letter and send it to the governor. We feel like that's our best chance to get some of this disaster relief. We did write a letter personally to the governor asking for $30 million, and we hope we can get part or as much of that as possible.
Thanks, you guys. We appreciate it.